I have lived in the city of Toronto for 60 years, and I have yet to apply for a driver's license. I did work as an active transport courier from 1981 until 2005, and I've done hundreds of thousands of kilometers of goods deliveries in the city for the government, for the arts community, for the business community. But I wanted to share with you the fact that it is possible to move goods and move people in our city without using motor vehicles. And it's actually more efficient and certainly better for the environment. In Toronto, we've had an active transport delivery service since the 1800s. And it's people that walked and used the transit of the day and bicycles from the 1880s on. We've got an article from the Toronto Star in 1902 that talks about, they were interviewing a bike courier, and he said, nowadays it's a cinch to do this job in 1902. In the old days, you had to either hoof it or you had to pay your own car fare. So in the 1880s, they were using the forerunner of the TTC and their feet to deliver packages. The first courier race between two courier companies in Toronto was in 1895 on the Toronto Island. So this is 100 years of history that we have in this city that has been ignored. We had the answer to more sustainable goods delivery, and it went the way of everything else in North America, where we have tried to use the motor vehicle for everything. One size fits all, no matter what the job or the journey, we use motor vehicles. That's basically how I got into the idea of being a bike courier. When I was 30 years old, I had to get out of my artistic agency, and I did that for 25 years. I worked in the courier industry after I got the first job. But my first year as a bike courier, I found that as I say, I was 31. I'd had all these fairly sedentary jobs, and I found that I was eating, like a month into it, I'm spending all this money and eating, much more than I ever had before. And so when the first year came around that I had to pay my taxes with my huge income from being a bike courier, I went to Revenue Canada and I said, hey, since the car company or the car couriers are able to deduct the cost of their fuel, their gasoline costs, shouldn't I be able to deduct the cost of my fuel, which, because I'm an active transportation person, when I'm walking, I'm the vehicle, and when I'm on a bicycle, I'm the engine. So to fuel this engine or vehicle, shouldn't I be able to write off the cost of my fuel? Because that's how I'm getting from point to point, same as a car courier. And they said, oh, no. Give us your money and don't bother us with this, right? That's ridiculous. So I went away the first year and I came back again the second year, because the second year I'd spent a lot of money, and I had to eat twice as much. I didn't know it was that much because I didn't really know how to figure all this stuff out. But I had to eat twice as much as I had before just to maintain my body weight. I was losing like anywhere from 6 to 8 pounds in a week just going to work, and this is eating as much as I possibly could. Right now, I avoid meat because it's too hard to process. It really tires one out when you're working. Like I would be working 13 hours a day as hard as I physically could, because that's how you get paid. It's all on commission, so you don't have to. There's a misconception about bike couriers that they're speeding to get to a destination, and that's why they're running red lights and all this the legendary stuff that goes on. If you're running through red lights as a bike courier, you're not a good bike courier, because if you get a ticket, that's a day's pay, and when you're making a little bit of money, that's not a good idea. So those people don't last. or they don't do it for very long. That's just another one of those ridiculous ideas. But you make your money by working as hard as possible and doing as much work as possible. And you're paid by distance, you're paid by weight, and you're paid by speed. But I went back to Revenue Canada that second year, and I said, hey, I'm eating a ton of food, and it's costing me a fortune. I don't want to have to pay tax on it. I can't afford to. I'm already below the poverty line. That's just the way couriers are, most of them. And if you factor in our expenses, we're well below the poverty line. Why do I have to pay this money? Oh yeah, give us your money. Come on, just give us your money. Here's the legal avenue you can take if you want to challenge this. I would have to take the Queen to court if I wanted to be allowed to deduct the cost of my fuel to do this. I said, well, I'm not going to do that. Fine, here's the money. And I went back to work. And I did this year after year after year until 1987, when I got hit by a brick on College Street as I was riding home one day, knocked me off my bike as I could hear the streetcar coming up behind me. I ran it, took a couple of steps as my feet were knocked off the bike because the brick landed right in front of me. And it had been dropped off a construction site. They were refacing a building on College Street at Strawn, or at, not at Strawn, but I haven't been a bike courier for a while. I retired 5 years ago. It'll come to me. But I took a couple of steps on my bike and then went down on my left shoulder and tore it off, right? It subluxated and dislocated and separated, and I had to have 3 operations to put it back. And then I had 2 years of physiotherapy to get it working again. And so during that time, money was really tight. And still with the problems I was having with Revenue Canada from previous years trying to get that money back, I now turned around and tried to go back and get that money. I started looking into it and researching just how it would be that I would be able to make that case in court and say, okay, this is why you should give me this tax deduction. I went to court and I told them the extra food that I eat, not the whole thing, not everything I eat, the extra food I eat is my fuel. I need it to maintain my body weight. I need it to perform at an optimum level. So it's exactly the same as gas in a car. I want to get that as a deduction. And not just for me, but for every other non-motorized courier in Canada. And the reason I did that is because I thought it was the easiest way, after all the years of going to these people, and it wasn't just the government. When I talked to lawyers or accountants or even the other couriers in this first 5 to 7 years when I was floating this idea, none of them agreed, not even the other couriers. The other couriers didn't want me to make any noise, right? Because they felt they'd be even harder pressed by Revenue Canada. Most of the couriers were moving from company to company, living in rooming house to rooming house, and Revenue Canada couldn't catch them if their lives depended on it, right? I mean, how could they possibly do it? Would they have them standing out on the street? Have you paid your taxes? It wasn't going to work. So the couriers didn't want to have anything to do with it. The lawyers said, no, it's impossible. The accountants just said, pay them your money. It has nothing to do with this. Makes no sense. So, but this brings me to the idea for the recipe that I'm trying to explain here. It's how does an individual in North America in the 21st century make a positive difference with all the problems we've got with the politics that we see around us. And I've heard this many times when I talk to people about this issue, about the taxes. Nobody thought of doing something like this because they don't have any effect. They don't have a voice in the way things happen in our society these days. So why even bother? Just pay the money. But I knew that they were wrong because I lived it every single day. So by taking what I knew, no matter how many people said no, right? It was a matter of changing things for the better instead of just going along. And I think that's what we all should be doing in our society. We all like to complain about the problems we have, but it comes down to our own behavior and what we can do to fix it, and what we're willing to sacrifice to fix the things that we see out there, right, that we know are wrong. So this was a very little thing, but it was a pivotal thing, because what I felt was that this was a way to get the government to acknowledge the fact that active transportation was a viable form of transportation. That if it was a part of an industry to move goods, and that the government recognized that this was fuel for a service, then we would be on the road to moving away from this motor vehicle addiction, and we could start to say, okay, we know why we're doing this, and we know the benefits of the motor vehicle, but we also have to start looking at the detrimental effect that this addiction is having to our entire society and our world in general. And so it was a very little thing, but I was adamant that this was the way it was, and I was going to stick to it. So in 1994, I took the Queen to court. But here's the judgment, and here it is, Alan Wayne Scott versus Her Majesty the Queen. And this is the judgment we got later on. But what I did was I took my eldest granddaughter's kite string, and I took out all the deliveries that I had for 1994. I had a list from my dispatcher. I had all the deliveries I had, and I got on a map, and I took the kite string, and I measured the length of each delivery, one after another, right, from destination to destination. Just the delivery itself, not the distance I had to go to pick up the delivery, just the actual delivery from point A to point B. That was, I felt, a way that I could define exactly what I had done, what my accomplishments were. So I did that, and I went through the whole year's deliveries. And I ended up with this huge long kite string, and then I measured the thing, and then I applied it to the scale on the map. And I did everything conservatively. I didn't want to give them an argument to come back and say, oh no, you did that wrong. So all my estimates were light as well. And then I went to the U of T's nutrition, Department of Nutrition, their medical faculty. And I said, how much food does somebody my size need to survive in Canada? And they went through this whole thing with me and showed me how much it was. And it was about 2,500 calories a day. Well, I was eating between 4,500 and 5,000 calories a day. And that was just, and again, this is really lowballing what the estimates were. So they couldn't come back to me and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. So I was eating double. So I went to them and I said, they had no idea how to figure out what the value of that would be. And I told them, okay, well, let's use the Government of Canada's numbers, and we'll say that $11 a day is the cost of a meal, because people that are traveling in the hinterland, they're allowed to claim the cost of a meal, which is $11, or was back then. And so I said, we'll use your numbers, right? Give us all an extra meal a day, right? And we don't have to pay tax on it, and we'll call that our fuel. Oh, no. So this was 1994. I went to the Tax Court of Canada with this argument, and the poor old guy that was the judge, he kept running off to the John like every 5 minutes, because I guess he was having problems. He was ill. And he comes back after I've made my whole case, and he says, sorry, I'd love to do something for you, but I can't. And he didn't really offer any ideas why he couldn't. He just said he couldn't, and banged the little gavel, and off he went, back to the John, I think. And that was it. I was out. I'd done this for how many years, and it was